If we turn to, well, let's look at verse 27 of chapter 1 first. It tells us that God created man in His image. In the image of God He made them. Male and female He created them. So unlike the animals and what the evolutionists want to tell us, that we came from slime and then apes and then man, God said, no. I created man in my image. He then goes on in chapter 2 and verse 8, it says, "And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there He put the man whom He had formed." So Adam was not actually made in Eden. He was made outside of Eden and then transported into Eden. And in verse 9 it says, "And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil." So we have caricatures and comics about Adam and Eve eating an apple. And because they ate an apple which they shouldn't eat, we have ended up in the state that we are today. Well, that's just a nonsense. The tree of life is no other than Christ. Christ Himself. He took on a human form when He came down to make the creation that we know as our world and everything in it. You find that in John chapter 1. It's very clear, it's very simple. It says that nothing was made that wasn't made by Him. But we see there that the tree of life was in the midst of the garden. I would like to suggest to you that Christ had a dwelling place in the garden. A wonderful, marvelous dwelling place. Because wherever God is, there is His temple. So why should we think that He was just sitting down underneath the tree? I don't think so for a minute. I will go further. I believe that He made Adam and Eve a house. He said, you know, in the Gospels He says, the birds have nests and the foxes have holes, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay His head. But He wouldn't have just made a creation and said, there you go, wander around. No, He would have done it perfectly. God works in intricate detail to perfection. So I believe that He had a house, a temple there, where He dwelt, and so did Adam and Eve have a dwelling place, because it says there, the tree of life was also in the midst of the garden. It says the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, we know that's the way of death, that's the way of Satan. I believe he had access to the Garden of Eden, but I don't believe he actually had a dwelling place there. But he certainly had access because he was able to tempt Eve. Now if we have a little look at Ezekiel chapter 28, we will see something of what Eden is about. Referring to Satan, it says in verse 13, Ezekiel 28 and verse 13, "Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God." Doesn't that tell us everything? So Eden was not just a nice garden. There was a heavenly Eden, a heavenly garden of God. And in that heavenly Eden, was none other than verse 14, "Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God." So there was a mountain of God in Eden. "Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire." So we can see here that Eden was very, very special. And the earthly Eden would have physically mirrored the heavenly Eden. Now, a little while ago I mentioned that Adam and Eve had to be taught. Well, what was the whole purpose of God creating man? What was it? You know, Genesis, the book of beginnings. Everything you see starts in Genesis, you turn to Revelation, and you will see its final fulfillment there. God's purpose was that He has wanted to dwell with man, to the extent that He wants mankind, to be His bride. That goes right back to Genesis. That's what He wanted. He didn't want Adam and Eve to sin, so that He'd have to come and die and suffer on our account. No. He wanted to be surrounded by men that He could enjoy on a different plane to the angels which He already had created. So his signs in the heavens would all be pointed towards this final objective, His dwelling with men. You might think that sounds a little bit far-fetched, but if you turn to Revelation, and Revelation 21, on our videos, we introduce our videos with a tiny excerpt from a piece of music called New Heavens and a New Earth. It's available on the website if you want to hear the whole thing. If it's at all possible, I'll try and see if I could insert it. Yes, I'll try and see if I can include it in this video. So maybe somewhere along, maybe the very beginning, we'll play the whole thing through for you. But it says, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea." We can deal with that at another time. "And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." So this isn't just a building. This is a structure composed of overcoming spiritual Israelites, if we can call them that. And it says in verse 3, "And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and He will dwell with them, and they shall be His people, and God Himself shall be with them and be their God."